The station hung silently in the dark space, far from any planet. Lights glimmered along its long corridors, but inside, a small part of the station never slept. Deep in the nursery, the alien cubs cried. Their voices were high and sharp, filling every corner of the hallways. No one had been able to calm them for nights. Scientists checked their monitors, adjusted the temperature, and even tried singing recordings from their home planets, but nothing worked. The cubs only cried louder. The cubs were strange creatures. Their skin shimmered in colors that changed with their mood. Their eyes were wide and bright, and their little bodies were full of energy and fear. They had arrived on the station weeks ago, and no one understood them completely. Many said they were dangerous. Some thought the cubs might never calm down. Every night, their cries echoed like alarms through the station, making work difficult for everyone. Aliens in crisp uniforms walked past the nursery doors, shaking their heads. They whispered to each other in low voices. "They are too young," one said. "They do not understand us." Another added, "Our machines cannot help them. Their cries are too strong." The cubs had tested every caretaker, every device, and every song the station had. Nothing could quiet them. Far away in another corridor, a human janitor moved quietly. He pushed a cleaning cart, sweeping the floors while humming softly to himself. He had been assigned to the station only recently, and most aliens hardly noticed him. He did his work without complaint and kept to himself. But every night as he passed the nursery, the cries reached him. At first he only felt curious. Then, slowly, he began to feel something deeper. The cubs were not loud because they were angry or aggressive. They were scared. They were lonely. The janitor stopped one night and leaned against the wall outside the nursery. He listened carefully. The cubs' cries were not random. They changed tone when one of them moved or when a small toy fell. He remembered how human babies cried when they were afraid or uncomfortable. He thought about what his mother used to do to calm him. Nothing too complicated. Nothing with machines or instructions. Just warmth, patience, and gentle care. Inside the nursery, the alien caretakers were busy taking notes. "Increase the gravity modulation," one said. "Try playing soothing sounds from the nebula recordings," suggested another. They moved quickly and precisely, but the cubs ignored them. The scientists looked frustrated. Some of the younger cubs tried to climb the walls or reach for the air vents, but no one could touch them safely. The cubs' cries grew louder, sharper, and more desperate. The human janitor watched through the small window. He did not have any special training. He had no advanced devices or knowledge of alien languages. All he had was a calm heart and a willingness to help. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "Maybe they just need someone to listen." That night, there was a small mistake in scheduling. The assigned caretaker had overslept. The nursery door opened slowly, and the janitor stepped inside. His boots made soft sounds on the polished floor. The cubs froze. Their eyes fixed on him, wide with curiosity. He moved slowly, keeping his hands low. He did not speak loudly. He just sat down on the floor, legs crossed, and waited. At first, nothing happened. The cubs watched him carefully. One tiny creature in a corner tilted its head. Another took a small step forward. The human reached out his hand slowly, palm open. The cubs sniffed and moved closer. He hummed a soft tune, a song from his childhood. The sound was low, gentle, and steady. The cubs did not cry anymore. Hours passed quietly. The janitor continued humming, rocking slightly back and forth. The cubs curled near him one by one. He did not rush. He did not force them. He only stayed there, calm and patient. Outside the nursery, the station lights blinked and the monitors tracked the cubs' heartbeats. The readings were astonishing. The cubs were finally at peace. They slept. When the next shift of scientists arrived, they were shocked to find the cubs calm. They stared at the human janitor in disbelief. Their machines had failed. Their strategies had failed. Yet this simple human had succeeded. The cubs, so loud and untouchable for nights, rested quietly in his presence. The janitor smiled softly and whispered, "See? It was not hard." The aliens did not understand how something so simple could work. But they recorded every detail, every gesture, every hum. They wanted to learn, but they also felt something strange, respect, maybe even admiration. That night the station felt different. The long corridors no longer echoed with piercing cries. The cubs slept safely, and the human janitor quietly returned to his cleaning duties. He moved along the halls, pushing his cart, humming softly. Deep down he knew this was only the beginning. But for the first time the station felt peaceful. The next morning the station buzzed with quiet whispers. Every corridor seemed a little brighter, yet every scientist walked carefully, unsure what had just happened. The cubs had slept for the first time and no one could explain why. Monitors showed steady heartbeats, calm breathing, and little movements that looked like peaceful dreaming. The human janitor had returned to his duties, sweeping floors and collecting empty trays, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet some aliens noticed. A young researcher paused near the nursery door, peering through the glass. She frowned. How? She muttered to herself. The cubs, they shouldn't be able to calm down. Her colleagues were too focused on data sheets and graphs to notice, but she could not look away. The janitor had entered, sat down, and somehow, the cubs had stopped crying. The human did not speak their language. He did not understand their machines or charts. All he had done was notice something simple. The cubs were afraid and they were lonely. They had voices full of noise, but that noise was not anger. It was fear, confusion, and a desire for comfort. He had remembered how human children responded to calmness, to warmth, and to gentle attention. He had trusted that memory and it had worked. That afternoon, while cleaning the lower halls, he paused again near the nursery. The cubs were awake this time, pacing and exploring their enclosure. The janitor noticed small details that the scientists had ignored. One cub flinched at sudden movements. Another seemed drawn to soft sounds. The cubs responded to curiosity, not commands. Machines and programs could not reach that part of their minds, but he could. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "I think I understand you." Meanwhile, the scientists began to argue. Some insisted that the cubs were only quiet temporarily. Others worried about the station's reputation if the cubs remained unstable. They suggested sedation, adjustments to environmental controls, and even advanced emotional simulations. The janitor listened quietly from a distance. He did not interfere, but he watched the cubs with careful eyes, noting every twitch, every blink, every shift of their luminous skin. One cub climbed the side of the nursery wall and looked down at the janitor. Its eyes were wide, full of curiosity. The janitor knelt slightly, keeping his hands low, and hummed the same soft tune from the previous night. The cub paused, sniffed, and then stepped closer. Slowly, other cubs followed. The janitor did not rush them. He waited, patient and calm, letting the cubs decide how near they wanted to be. Hours passed. The scientists observed from behind the glass, taking notes in silence. They had seen many methods fail, but this human janitor had discovered something new. They did not understand the feelings involved. Machines could measure movement, breathing, and temperature, but they could not measure trust. They could not replicate patience or quiet care. And yet the cubs responded. Slowly, carefully, their cries softened and faded. The janitor continued humming, swaying gently. He picked up a small cub that had wandered too far and held it close. The creature relaxed immediately, pressing its tiny body against his chest. Its friends watched, then edged closer, drawn by the calmness. The human did not speak. Words were not necessary. The cubs seemed to recognize the safety in his presence. The station's monitors recorded every heartbeat, and every reading showed lowered stress levels. The results were unlike anything the scientists had expected. Later, when the janitor returned to his usual cleaning, he paused once more. He looked back at the nursery and smiled. He did not know if the cubs would remain calm forever, but he had learned something important. Noticing small details, understanding feelings, and offering quiet care could make a difference. Machines, instructions, and commands were useful, but they could never replace patience and empathy. That evening the cubs slept again. The station was quiet. Even the usually noisy corridors seemed softer. Aliens walking past the nursery stopped and glanced at the peaceful creatures, their glowing skin calm, their eyes closed. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others whispered to each other, unsure how a simple human janitor had achieved what advanced technology could not. For the first time, the human janitor realized the impact of small, quiet acts. He was not a scientist. He was not in charge of the station. He only cleaned floors and pushed carts. Yet his actions had changed the nursery. He had given the cubs something they needed most, a feeling of safety, of being seen, and of being cared for. As he finished his work and moved down the empty hallways, the janitor felt a quiet satisfaction. The cubs would not remember his name, but they would remember his calm presence. And maybe, just maybe, the aliens would begin to understand what humans were truly capable of, not through machines, not through power, but through patience, empathy, and simple care. That night, the station rested. Outside, stars blinked in the endless darkness. Inside, alien cubs dreamed for the first time, and a human janitor quietly hummed his tune, unaware of the silent respect growing among those who watched him. The next evening, the station's lights glimmered softly, reflecting off the polished walls of the nursery. The cubs had been restless for hours, pacing and calling out in high-pitched cries. The alien caretakers hovered nearby, frowning at the monitors. They had tried everything: soft music from distant planets, gentle warmth, even adjusting the gravity. Yet nothing had calmed the cubs completely. Their cries were sharp, urgent, and relentless. The human janitor walked along the corridors, pushing his cleaning cart. He had finished his daytime tasks but kept an ear on the nursery. Each cry felt like a puzzle, a riddle that no machine could solve. He paused outside the door, listening. The cubs were not angry or aggressive, they were scared. Lonely. They wanted attention, but no one had given it in the way they needed. He remembered the first night he had entered the nursery. How the cubs had frozen at his presence, how they had slowly come closer as he hummed softly. He remembered the gentle rhythm of rocking, the warmth of holding one tiny creature in his arms. That had worked. The cubs had trusted him, and in return he had been patient. Simple care, not technology, had calmed them. Tonight he decided to try the same approach again. The nursery door opened slowly and he stepped inside, keeping his movements careful and deliberate. The cubs watched him immediately. Some backed into corners but most paused, their glowing eyes following him. He knelt on the floor, keeping his hands low and open. He hummed softly, a tune from Earth that had always brought comfort to children. One cub, smaller than the rest, approached hesitantly. Its body trembled and its eyes were wide with uncertainty. The janitor smiled gently. He stretched out his hands slowly, letting the cub sniff and examine him. There was no sudden motion, no loud voice. Only patience and calm. The cub stepped closer, then pressed against his chest. Its tiny heartbeat matched the rhythm of his hum. Slowly the other cubs followed, drawn by the sense of safety. The alien scientists observed through the glass, taking notes furiously. Their mouths were slightly open in disbelief. How could such a simple act work where their advanced machines had failed? They whispered to each other in astonishment, unable to explain the calm that now filled the nursery. The janitor rocked the small cub in his arms, swaying gently back and forth. He hummed continuously, keeping his voice low and soothing. Another cub crawled onto his lap, pressing its glowing body close. Soon the cubs curled around him, their tiny limbs intertwining. He did not rush or force them. He allowed them to explore, to find comfort in their own way. Time passed quietly. The sounds of crying diminished, replaced by soft breathing and the occasional small sigh. For the first time the nursery felt peaceful. The janitor looked around, noticing small gestures. A tail flick, a blink, a nuzzle. These subtle signals told him that the cubs were no longer afraid. They were relaxed, content, and, above all, trusting. Outside the glass walls, the aliens continued to watch. Their monitors showed the cubs' stress levels dropping steadily. Heart rates slowed, breathing became even, and glowing skin shifted from frantic patterns to calm, gentle hues. The human janitor had achieved what they could not: trust and comfort. Machines could measure, monitor, and analyze, but they could not give warmth, understanding, or patience. Only a human could do that. One of the caretakers finally spoke. It is impossible," he murmured. "We tried everything and yet, he has calmed them." Another nodded slowly. "Perhaps, humans are different. They have something we do not understand." The janitor did not hear them. He was focused entirely on the cubs, humming and rocking, ensuring each one felt safe. Hours passed and the cubs continued to settle around him. They moved freely but did not wander far. Occasionally, one would glance at the glass, almost as if inviting the observers to notice the difference. The janitor smiled softly and whispered, "There, you're safe now. You can rest." He did not expect a response, but the cubs seemed to understand. Their movements became slower, their breathing deeper, and soon, one by one, they fell asleep. The alien scientists looked at each other, astonished. Their calculations had failed. Their advanced technology had failed. Yet this human, simple in his actions and gentle in his heart, had succeeded. The cubs were calm, peaceful, and asleep. The janitor carefully placed one of the smaller cubs back into its corner and continued to hum softly until the last one rested. Finally he rose, dusted his hands, and returned to the door. He glanced back at the nursery once more. The cubs were sleeping soundly, their glowing skin now soft and gentle. He pushed the door closed quietly and walked down the corridor, returning to his duties. That night the station was quiet. Even the usually loud corridors seemed softer. The human janitor moved along his route, humming faintly to himself. He had no idea how extraordinary his act was. He only knew that he had helped and the cubs were finally at peace. For the first time since their arrival, the alien cubs slept without fear. And for the first time the station realized that sometimes the simplest act, a soft hum, a gentle rock and quiet patience, could do more than any machine or advanced science ever could. The next morning the station felt different. Even the hum of engines and soft blinking of lights seemed quieter, almost respectful. Word had spread quickly through the corridors. The cubs had slept through the night. Scientists whispered in small groups, checking monitors repeatedly. They could not believe what they saw. The human janitor had done something no one else could. Outside the nursery, aliens walked cautiously. They peered through the glass walls, curious and puzzled. The cubs were awake now, stretching and blinking slowly, but there was no panic, no frantic movement. They moved calmly, their glowing skin shifting gently instead of flashing in sharp, stressful patterns. The janitor had returned to his usual cleaning, pushing his cart along the corridor. He hummed softly, careful not to disturb the cubs further. The young researcher from before stopped near the nursery door. She observed quietly, her eyes wide. "It's impossible," she whispered to her colleague. "Machines, simulations, even the best caretakers, nothing worked. And yet he did it." Her colleague frowned. "How? It's just a human. How could he calm them?" They both watched as the cubs, usually restless and loud, moved freely but with confidence, exploring their surroundings without fear. The janitor noticed the cubs' reactions, but he did not act quickly. He understood that rushing could scare them. Instead, he walked slowly, keeping his hands low and his voice soft. One cub wandered near him, then another, curious about the gentle figure in the room. He hummed the same soft tune, low and steady, and swayed slightly from side to side. The cubs paused, sniffed the air and settled closer to him. Inside the observation room, the alien scientists began taking notes furiously. They recorded every heartbeat, every small movement, and every sound. "This is unprecedented," one of them said. "All of our models predicted failure. Yet the cubs respond to him." Another nodded, adding, "There is something in humans we do not understand. It is not their technology. It is something else. Something quiet. Something gentle." The janitor continued his simple routine. One cub climbed onto his lap, while another brushed against his leg. He did not speak. Words were unnecessary. The cubs responded to calmness, to patience, and to the warmth of presence. Slowly he hummed a tune from his childhood. The cubs' tiny bodies relaxed, their glowing skin softening further. Even the cub who had always been the most restless now stayed close. Hours passed. The cubs moved freely, exploring and sniffing around the nursery, but whenever the janitor hummed or gently swayed, they paused and watched him. He never forced them to do anything. He never raised his voice or made sudden movements. They learned to trust him, and in that trust the nursery became calm. Outside, the alien leadership began to notice the change. Commanders and senior researchers came to watch through the glass. Their faces were serious, but there was a hint of amazement in their expressions. They had never seen anything like this. Machines could control the environment, but they could not control fear or loneliness. Only care, patience, and understanding could do that. The janitor hummed softly and reached for a small toy on the floor, rolling it toward a cub. The cub nudged it gently and then returned to the janitor as if seeking reassurance. Other cubs followed, one by one. The observation room was silent except for quiet murmurs of astonishment. These small gestures, so simple and human, had created something extraordinary: trust. By evening, the cubs were moving less and less, curling near the janitor or resting quietly in their corners. The monitors showed stable heartbeats and calm breathing. Scientists exchanged looks. They had studied alien behavior for decades, but this was new. They realized that the cubs had responded not to technology or advanced methods, but to a human who noticed them, who listened, and who cared. The janitor finally stood and stepped back, brushing off his hands. He glanced at the sleeping cubs and smiled softly. They were peaceful now, safe for the first time since their arrival. He did not expect recognition or praise. To him, it was enough that the cubs trusted him and could finally rest. That night, the station was quieter than ever. Even the usually busy corridors seemed calm. Aliens walked past the nursery, pausing to watch the cubs sleep, their glowing bodies soft and gentle. They whispered among themselves, still amazed that one human could achieve what many highly trained specialists had failed to do. The human janitor hummed a soft tune as he finished his rounds, pushing his cart gently along the hallways. He did not know that the aliens were beginning to respect him in ways he could not yet understand. He only knew that he had made a difference. The cubs, once loud, scared, and restless, were now calm and peaceful. For the first time, the station had seen that humans could do something no machine or advanced alien method could: offer patience, comfort, and understanding. And in that simple, quiet way, the human janitor had changed everything. The following morning, the station was calm in a way it had never been before. Even the usual hum of machinery seemed softer, as if the entire structure had learned to breathe gently. The alien cubs slept peacefully, their glowing bodies pulsing slowly in the light. Monitors showed steady heartbeats, even breathing, and subtle movements that looked like dreaming. The human janitor moved quietly along the hallways, pushing his cleaning cart as usual. The alien leadership had gathered near the nursery. Their eyes were wide with curiosity and something else: respect. They had watched the cubs for weeks, seen the chaos, the cries, and the stress. They had tried every method their technology allowed, but nothing had worked. Then, one simple human had entered, patient, gentle, and calm, and suddenly the cubs had rested. The young researcher who had first noticed him stepped forward. "It is not the machines," she said softly. "It is him. He understands them in a way we cannot." One of the commanders nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is what humans are known for," he said. "Not strength, not speed, not advanced technology, but understanding, patience, and care." Others murmured in agreement. The human janitor did not know he was being discussed. He continued his work, humming softly as he moved along the corridors. Occasionally he glanced toward the nursery, smiling quietly. The cubs had begun to recognize him. Their small eyes followed him, their bodies relaxed as soon as he appeared. They did not cry. They did not panic. They trusted him. Inside the nursery, the cubs explored slowly, their movements cautious but curious. One climbed onto a low platform and gazed at the janitor, as if inviting him closer. Another nudged a small toy toward him. He smiled and hummed gently, picking up the toy and rolling it back to the cub. One by one, they began to gather near him, seeking the warmth and calm that his presence brought. The alien scientists studied this closely. Their monitors tracked every heartbeat, every twitch of a tail, every small change in color. They realized that the cubs were responding not to commands or program sounds, but to something deeper. The human had offered something they could not quantify: attention, patience, and care. And in return, the cubs had given trust. By evening, the cubs were calm and sleepy once again. They rested in small groups near the janitor or in their cozy corners. Their glowing bodies were soft and steady. The janitor knelt on the floor, humming quietly, watching over them. He felt a gentle satisfaction. He had done something important, but he did not think of it as heroic. He had simply noticed, and he had cared. The alien leadership had made a decision. They would allow human interaction in the nursery regularly. They realized that no machine, no advanced alien method, could replace the quiet, gentle presence of a human. The janitor was no longer just a cleaner. He had become essential not for what he could build or fix, but for what he could give: comfort, understanding, and patience. Word spread throughout the station. Other humans who worked in maintenance and support smiled quietly, proud of what one of their own had accomplished. The cubs continued to trust the janitor, and slowly they began to thrive. They learned to play together, explore their environment safely, and respond to the humans around them. Every day, the nursery became a place of calm and happiness, rather than chaos and fear. The janitor continued his routines, quietly cleaning and humming, unaware of the respect growing for him among aliens and humans alike. He did not seek recognition. He only knew that the cubs were safe, and that they could sleep without fear. That was enough. As the stars outside the station blinked softly, the human janitor moved through the halls, a gentle presence in a world of advanced machines and complex aliens. He had shown something simple yet powerful: humans could touch hearts, calm fears, and bring trust where machines could not. The cubs slept peacefully, and the station, for the first time, understood that sometimes the smallest, quietest acts could change everything. And so, humanity earned silent respect across the stars, not through strength, technology, or knowledge, but through patience, understanding, and the simple gift of care. The human janitor smiled softly, unaware that he had shown what humans were truly known for. The cubs slept, the station rested, and a gentle hum carried through the corridors. A simple tune, a quiet reminder that care and patience could change the universe in ways no machine ever could.